What's going on, my F1 friends? It's your boy Dalton from the Petrol List, and let's just get into it. Before we do the race review, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I'm at 191 subscribers. Let's get me to 200. Let's do it. We can do this together. All right, anyway, Zandvoort was a huge opportunity for Formula One to tell the story for what's going to happen in the rest of 2024 as well as 2025. Is Lando Norris going to be the 2024 champion? I do not think so. Someone actually pointed out what his road to the 2024 Drivers' Championship would be, and I would say it's a bit insurmountable. Daniel Valente at F1 Guy Dan says if Lando Norris wins all 9 remaining races with 5 fastest laps and all sprints, and Max Verstappen finishes P2 in all, Lando becomes world champion by 1 point. You know, there are some caveats there. Max Verstappen, he might not finish in P2 every time. The RB20 is really going downhill, and if there are any DNFs, if there are any crashes, that puts Lando Norris a lot closer to that driver's championship. But what it did tell us is that 2025, who knows? It could be the year that Lando Norris becomes a world drivers champion. Now, I'm not going to hold my breath. That's a long time. There are a lot of things that can change. The most successful, statistically successful Formula One driver in the history of racing, Sir Lewis Hamilton, is going over to Ferrari in 2025. Things could be completely mixed up. The Mercedes cars are getting faster. We're going to have Kimi Antonelli eating into the points as well, I think. So it's not a done deal. 2025 is not a done deal. 2024 is not even a done deal. We still have a lot of racing to go. Let's get into that. Lap 1. Norris has a terrible start. What is up with Lando Norris and lap 1, turn 1? There's a meme of Max Verstappen sleeping well, knowing that it was Lando on pole. And if you saw the race, you know that that didn't completely come to fruition. But lap 1, turn 1, it looked exactly like last year. I took a note in 2023, after lap 1, turn 1, it was Verstappen in the lead, then Norris, then Russell. Guess what? 2024, after lap 1, turn 1, Verstappen in the lead, Norris, then Russell. So at first glance, I thought that we were going to see the exact same thing as last year, and that somehow, even if Red Bull didn't pull out the full-on, 20-second lead, I thought that Max Verstappen getting into to first position was going to be enough for him to win the race, even if it was only by a 2-second margin. Now, Piastri was stuck behind Norris and forced to lose a place to George Russell, who simply had better track position coming into that turn. And like I said, Piastri was stuck in traffic. There was nowhere to go. He was boxed in, and it made him give up a place. Back to Max Verstappen and how things went. This year, especially after Breakgate, the Red Bull was simply unable to pull away from the pack. The advantages of the T-valve, the inertia-based brake bias, could go from one side of the axle to the other. The advantages are turn-in, reduced drag because you don't need as much downforce to make the car turn in. High-speed corner stability. So on an F1 car, turn-in takes downforce. Downforce creates drag. Drag reduces top speed, and also fighting the wheel and the brakes in a high-speed turn causes tire degradation. So that one little T-valve, it makes such a huge difference, and you can see it in the pace of the Red Bull relative to the other cars. And not to say that Max Verstappen isn't a great driver, but he definitely had an advantage. And the margins are so small in Formula One cars. Just like George Russell in that 1.5 kilogram weight reduction, it balloons into a ginormous advantage. So much so that George Russell got disqualified and the T-valve is disqualified. But the result is Lando Norris is able to keep up with Max Verstappen for the next 15 laps. I mean, I don't think he got any more than 2 or 3 seconds away from Max Verstappen the whole time. Very telling. Again, I thought it was going to be enough to give Max Verstappen the win, but that was not to happen. Okay, we're only on lap 2, but let's keep going. Lewis Hamilton had already gained 2 positions. He goes for a complex overtake on Yuki Tsunoda on the inside just before a chicane that opens up into a straight. Now, this is significant because most drivers would not have risked the overtake in the chicane, especially knowing that a straight was coming up. They would have tried to stay within DRS of the lead driver and use that DRS to pass, especially because once you get out of that chicane and into the straight, if you just pass someone, chances are that car is going to have DRS on you. So you might be giving up that overtake and a whole bunch of tire wear for nothing. Lewis Hamilton took that risk. It showed ultimate confidence in his driving ability, in his skill, because that was very complex. Could have resulted in a crash, but this being Lewis Hamilton, it did not. And he had enough confidence to know that not only was he going to take the lead, but he was going to keep the lead going into that straight and going into that next turn. So he's still got the drive of a champion. He's got the drive. He's got the hunger. He's got the skill. He's got the discipline. I think that Lewis Hamilton definitely has his mojo back. He has just got to get to a team that respects his accomplishments. Now, lap 8. Great pass by Sainz to the outside, but again, in the beginning of this video, I said this was very telling. This race was very telling. That pass, when you're watching it, it highlights Aston Martin's woes. You could tell that Aston Martin, I think it was being driven by Fernando Alonso, so you know it's not the driver. But there was not enough grip on that high/medium speed turn for Fernando Alonso to continue to fight against Sainz. Now, fast forward to lap 11, look at the difference. So Sainz is doing the same thing. You know, it's a sweeping turn. It's a battle for position, but look at just how close Pierre Gasly stays with Sainz going around that turn. As a matter of fact, they exit the turn at the same time, at the same speed, and the only thing that gave Sainz the advantage was track position, not a vastly superior car. So you can kind of see why Aston Martin is so desperate to get Adrian Newey in their ranks, because they've got to figure out what is going on. Aston Martin is overtaken on the corner, and you know, a car that can't corner at those speeds, you're just going to lose confidence in the car, and your willingness to fight, to lose tires, to put yourself at risk is just going to go downhill. And that was really reflected in Aston Martin's race, and that was pretty much the last you're going to hear from Aston Martin, except for some tertiary overtakes later on. By lap 17, Max Verstappen only had a 6.19 second lead on Norris. So the lower top speed and cornering entry exhaust both the RB20 and its driver, Max Verstappen. If you take a look when they're exiting the corner, you see that little tail wiggle from the RB20? That is Max Verstappen trying desperately to hold on to control of that car. Meanwhile, the McLaren by Norris is smooth. That wiggle is a mental exhaustion. It's a tire exhaustion, and you could see from that point on the time between the lead car and the RB20 just started to grow. As a matter of fact, by lap 25, Norris had a 4.2 second lead. All right, lap 26. This was, in my opinion, effectively the end of George Russell's race. He had a 3.4 second pit stop, and he went from third place all the way down into ninth. Now, in my opinion, had he had a more typical 2.5 second pit stop, maybe he would have re-entered the track at 7th place instead of 9th. Now, Leclerc and Ferrari actually had a good strategy, and they undercut George Russell, allowing Leclerc to heat up his tires by the time George Russell was on that outlap. So even if Russell had entered the track just ahead of Leclerc, there is a good chance that Leclerc would have still passed George Russell on that outlap, but it would have caused Leclerc to eat up a little more tire It would have caused the driver who was behind Leclerc, I can't remember who it was, to eat up a little bit of tire, and that would have given George Russell a better fight, maybe a sixth place finish instead of seventh. Moving on to lap 40. This scene didn't really make that much difference because it was kind of, the mid-pack, back of the pack, but it was a brawl. It looked like iRacing. Like, it was, especially for that late in the race. You would expect that kind of thing maybe lap 1, maybe even lap 2, but lap 40 in the race, unheard of. And I gotta say, Gasly absolutely looked like a beast. It was, I can't even do proper commentary on that because the cars were so all over the place. I can't pick it apart. It was just, you gotta watch it, appreciate it. It turned into the regular Formula One kind of like linear fashion for that stage in the race afterward, but man, there was some racing going on. All right, by lap 47, the final order is almost established. You've got Norris with a 12-second lead. You've got Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Piastri, and then Russell, but Russell still had some places to lose because at lap 55, he still needed a pit and would eventually drop down to 7th. And that would put Lewis Hamilton right behind his teammate George Russell. George Russell's taking a lot of flack, but I got to tell you, he keeps putting his foot in his mouth. He comes across as disingenuous, and I'm still kind of rooting for the guy. But at this point, he went from, was it 4th place down to 7th? His teammate went from 14th place up to 8th, and was looking like he could have overtaken George Russell there toward the end. But it just shows you the performance gap between the 7.5-time world champion and George Russell. I think he's got to do less talking, more driving if he is going to maintain his seat beyond the first year of the new regulations. I think his contract is over at 2026, at the end of 2026. And there's just a host of talented drivers up and coming. Okay, let's get into like the kind of the human side. So I took some notes here. Don't mind me reading the script. Zandvoort was a very human event. Different teams and different drivers were forced to deal with situations they weren't used to. Lando Norris found himself in a dominant lead for the lion's share of the race. 3-time champion Max Verstappen found himself in 2nd place for the podium. And honestly, looking quite grateful for even that. That was unheard of. Hamilton clawed his way up to 8th place from 14th, and it was one of his most triumphant drives. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that 8th place for Lewis Hamilton would have sounded triumphant? And this time it was. Russell and Perez were humbled by their own performances. Let's not forget during qualification, Perez, I don't use F-bombs. Perez was like, what the F was that idiot doing? My guy, you're barely making it through the season. And there are a lot of doubts that you're going to make it into next season. Instead of worrying about what the F that idiot is doing, maybe worry about what the F you're doing. Try to maintain your place. So Russell and Perez, humbled by their own performances, and Sainz and Leclerc drove with so much heart. You would think that the duo is not going to be broken up at the end of this season. They drove for Ferrari as if Ferrari was their forever home. Leclerc drove as if he was the lead driver for Ferrari and would remain lead driver going into 25 and 26. Sainz drove as if he was staying with Ferrari even though he's going to Williams next year. And let's talk about the track itself. The banked turns and the steep undulations and the display on the overhead camera, on the onboard camera, it really made one feel like they were watching footage from a dogfight and not an automobile race. We are truly blessed to witness these things. And let's briefly talk about 2025 predictions. Max Verstappen, like I said at the beginning of this, I think he is still going to win the Drivers' Championship. But I think Lando Norris has an opportunity to rack up a lot of wins. There are going to be drivers' changes in the other top-tier cars, and that always takes a little bit of getting used to. Ferrari is going to be a little bit mixed up with, Hamilton coming over, Sainz leaving, Mercedes is going to be mixed up. So even if they have a fast car, they're going to have what I think is an underperformer in George Russell, and they're going to have a new guy in Kimi Antonelli. And lastly, Red Bull has fallen from their dominance following Breakgate. Now, can they adjust the balance of that car to have top speed as well as turn in? Sure, but without the T valve, they're at a bit of a disadvantage. And do they want to spend all that time developing their car for 2025? Or, are they going to be thinking ahead to 2026? So that might just leave some room, some opportunity for Lando Norris to stack up a bunch of wins and possibly a driver's championship. Again, it's way too early for that to be known. We're just going to have to watch and see. And I, for one, am looking forward to it. This has been the Petrolist. I have been Dalton, and you have been great. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next week. I'm out.